From the Oklahoman's video studio, I'm Dave Morris, and every month we catch up with our friends at the American Heart Association for a segment called Heartbeat OK, where we talk about various topics, and May is American Stroke Month. So joining us today to talk about strokes, what you should know, and the other side of that, Leila French, who is a stroke survivor, and of course Terry Bailey from the American Heart Association. Ladies, thanks so much for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Leila, you have quite the story of how you dealt with a stroke and how your family members recognized you were dealing with a stroke, and I'll kind of throw it your way to kind of walk through what your story is.
Well, the interesting thing was that I live in Moore, but we weren't at home. We were staying with my granddaughter in Abilene, Texas, while her parents had gone to Florida. And so she was going to go with her youth group at church to Six Flags on Saturday, but they had major storms, so they had to cancel it. So she was at home, and she decided to ask her pawpaw to take her to her favorite restaurant, which is Olive Garden.
Nothing wrong with that. Good breadsticks, good salad.
Yeah, great.
And how old is your granddaughter?
17.
She's 17?
Yes, and they live in the country.
Okay,
so
it's a bit of a destination.
Yeah, so we went into town, and this was for dinner. And so we had ordered, and I had just finished my soup, and I received a text from a friend asking me how things were going, and I decided I would answer her. I picked up my phone. My granddaughter was sitting straight across from me. My husband was on my right. The interesting thing is my husband has dementia. It's not severe, but he doesn't always pick up on the little things with people or situations.
But your granddaughter was paying attention right here.
Yes, she very much was, because I got my phone out of my purse and I started to text, but my fingers wouldn't work. I couldn't get my fingers to work. And
did you notice it at this point?
Not at that point, because then she asked me, she said, "Grandma, what's wrong with you?" And I said to her, "I don't know. I want to text, but I can't get my fingers to work." So I picked up my phone and I actually tried it again, and then they still wouldn't work.
Brain to fingers just wasn't happening.
And I wasn't having any speech problems at that time, but at that point, I kind of spit up a little bit. It wasn't a certain amount, and my husband took the napkin and wiped it off, and then my granddaughter knew something is going on with Grandma. So she picked up her phone and called her mom in Florida. Well, a number of years ago, in 2007, I had been diagnosed with AFib, and actually been in the hospital with it. And I wasn't being treated for it at that time, but I had sent an email to a number of friends, to a number of my friends and my daughter, telling about what to look for if someone is having a stroke.
So your granddaughter calls your daughter that your daughter's remembering this at this point.
And it was FAST is what I sent her. And then my daughter also stayed with my mother when my mother was dying, and my mother had several little mini strokes. So she remembered that. She remembered the FAST, and she told my granddaughter Marissa. Her name is Marissa.
We should name your granddaughter at some point during this
give
segment.
her a name.
Give her some credit here.
Yeah, give her a name. Anyway, she told Marissa, "You hang up immediately and call 911. Grandma's having a stroke."
Wow.
Well, my husband wasn't even aware of it at all. Well, then she hung up, called 911. They were at the restaurant within 5 minutes. We were in town, so they didn't have far to go. And by then, my daughter called me, but I was able to answer the phone. I couldn't text, but I was able to answer the phone. And when I answered the phone, she said, "Mom, you had speech impairment at that time." So.
Did you realize that?
No, I didn't. I didn't really know what was going on. The neurologist that I saw when I got back home told me that I had, that the 2 strokes that I had in the 2 arteries are on the left side of the brain, and they affect your speech. And so I didn't realize that it was my speech that was being affected because I couldn't move my fingers,
right.
you know. Anyway, my granddaughter knew immediately that something's wrong with Grandma, and the EMTs came, got me to the hospital. And the interesting part is there's 2 hospitals in Abilene. There's one down by where they live, but there's one further away, and they took me to the one that's further away from where they live because they're able to treat strokes. So from the time I was last normal, so to speak, until they got me to the hospital and they did the TPA, it was probably within the hour. And because I got help so quickly, that's why I recovered so quickly. I was in ICU that evening. I was in ICU on Sunday, and then on Monday they moved me to a regular room. On Sunday, the nurses told me that I was already moving my arms, and I was already trying to have a conversation with the nurses. And the stroke affected my speech, so they were quite surprised that the TPA...
You were already having a conversation at that point.
Yeah, they were quite surprised that TPA had worked so quickly. So what I emailed my daughter, the acronym FAST, was the face, arms, speech, and time. And they knew something was wrong. They sensed something was wrong. But they got me to the hospital so quickly that the time aspect of it is what really saved my life. I have had people say to me since I had this stroke, I had it May 23rd of last year. So in August, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in a while, and he was talking to my husband about how's your wife doing and everything. Well, I walked up on the conversation, and he looked at my husband.
Like, right here?
Yeah. I walked up on the conversation, and he looked at my husband, and he said, "She's been faking it the whole time." Well, I wasn't faking it, but it was the time aspect that helped me. And I think that's what women need to realize. They need to educate those around them. I mean, I never dreamed that my 17-year-old daughter would actually, so to speak, she said to me, "Grandma, I saved your life. Can we go shopping?"
She's going to play that card. We're talking with Leila French, who is sharing a dramatic, remarkable story of recovery and survival of a stroke, and Terry Bailey with the American Heart Association is with us as well. And Terry, we're hearing 2 things here: education and speed. The timeline from pre-soup to the hospital bed really paid some dividends in her case.
Absolutely. You know, that's one of the things, and I love that you brought up the acronym of FAST, because that's something that we are always out there teaching. The face is, if you see one side of if you think somebody's having a stroke, you can look at their face, you might ask them to smile, if their smile is lopsided, or maybe if some of your face is a little bit droopier, you might be having a stroke. Arms. She had weakness probably in one of her arms, which is why she couldn't use her fingers.
Affected the text message.
Exactly.
Right.
You might, if you think somebody's having a stroke, you might ask them to hold their arms up at arm level like this. If they can't hold them up at the same level, then it's a huge warning sign. The speech is, you know, they might not be slurring their speech. It might be something that's just not making sense. So they might be trying to say dog and, you know, it's coming out umbrella. You know, so it's, you know, garbled speech is definitely one of those real warning signs. If you think somebody is, you might have them, you know, just say a simple phrase and say, "Can you repeat this phrase?" And if they can't repeat that phrase, it's a huge warning sign. And then the T, of course, is time to call 911.
How big of a difference was that, you think, in her case, the time?
Oh, it made all of the difference in the world, because that TPA is a clot-busting drug, and if you can get it within that first 90 minutes, your side effects from a stroke are absolutely minimal.
And so what are some of those side effects?
Well,
what could they be?
They could be loss of speech, maybe a slurred speech, loss of mobility. I saw, in my grandmother, for example, she had a stroke and she did not get there in that time, and she couldn't move her whole entire right side of her body after her stroke.
In a temporary or perhaps permanent way, right?
Exactly. Hers was permanent, but it could be temporary. But I've seen many cases of people who have some form of disability.
So getting that TPA drug to prevent any sort of blockage or clogs really does make a big difference.
It's huge.
Or can certainly help.
And it can help save your life too. So
Correct. And yes, I got mine. I know it was within the hour of when I was last normal, and just to know that my granddaughter was so attuned to what grandma's what I usually do, and she knew that she needed to do something. She wasn't sure what, but Mom can tell me what to do, and that's what she did.
Well, that's a case of putting your cell phone away at the dinner table. Maybe not a good idea. In that case, it's a good thing that you both had that technology. And so I'm going to call Mom and see what's going on. But she remembered from her mom, and then also what you had emailed about the fast earlier.
Right. I went to my PCP, Dr. Misty Shea, recommended that I go to speech therapy because it seemed like I was having a few problems with verbs. And so I went to speech therapy for 6 weeks and sailed through it, so to speak. And she wanted me to go to an aphasia. An aphasia meeting is, they have those once a week at Porter Hospital. And aphasia is what you have as a result of having a stroke and not being able to speak properly. And there were a number of people there, including a doctor who had his stroke in the doctor's lounge at Porter Hospital.
Wow.
And he had aphasia, he had a brace on his leg. There was a lawyer who was 42 years old, I believe, and she had a stroke. And several others. We all went around and introduced ourselves, and when it came to me, I had to say, my name is Leila French, and I had a stroke on May 23rd, and I was speaking perfect because I got the TPA so quickly that by then, really, I was almost totally healed even by then, as far as being able to communicate properly. And I was very humbled by what these people are having to deal with. Some had their strokes 5 years ago, some 3, some 9.
They're still dealing with it.
And they're still dealing with aphasia and temporary paralysis of some kind.
Your anniversary is May 23rd. What are you going to do? You're going to celebrate it in any way. Maybe some Olive Garden.
Well, I might do that. My granddaughter's graduating from high school in Abilene, so we'll be down there.
Gotcha. She'll probably want you to take her shopping, right?
I'm sure she will.
Take advantage of that.
Also, she is. It's a good plug for the for the Go Red Luncheon, which is May 19th. So
yes.
It'll be a pre-anniversary party.
Yes, it will.
That is
Yes.
May 19th at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. Tickets and donation information can be found at okcgored.heart.org. And Terry, tell us more about it.
So the Go Red Luncheon, I love this event so much. Like you said, it's going to be Thursday, May 19th. And we start off, it's more than just a luncheon. So we start off with educational seminars, and we have some really great seminars that are going to be targeted for women and men. We have men that come as well. Mm-hmm. But we have some educational booths. There'll be areas that you can get your health screenings. We have a really fun auction. And then the luncheon itself is going to be a heart healthy luncheon, of course, and that'll start at 11:30. We'll be hearing more of Leila's story, of course, and celebrating, all of those who have survived heart disease and stroke. And it's just a really wonderful luncheon. The tickets are $250 per person. We still have tickets available, and you can go to that website and purchase your tickets. Or if you're interested in your company sponsoring, you can do that as well too on that website.
This awareness makes a huge difference, doesn't it? And this is an event that helps raise that awareness.
Absolutely. We've heard several stories of women who have gone to this luncheon, and then shortly after they've recognized some type of symptom in somebody. In fact, a few years ago we had somebody, a lady who had attended the luncheon the very next day. She was in her office and somebody was having symptoms, and the lady didn't want to go to the hospital, and she said,
No one
I
does.
was just at this luncheon and I just heard these these symptoms. You have to go. She called 911. The lady ended up was about to have cardiac arrest. So,
Wow.
So I mean, it's really exciting to see these stories. Education is so important. I love that you shared that. We want everybody to share that because we have such a small percentage of the people who even know what FAST is.
Right.
But just that acronym, it's such a simple acronym, and if you can just remember that in your brain, then you can possibly help save somebody else's life.
Again, that ticket information, the Go Red Luncheon, is Thursday, May 19th, at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. That website, okcgored.heart.org. Leela, I'll give you the last word. Any advice that you would give anyone else?
Well, definitely. I told you I was diagnosed in 2007 with AFib, and atrial fibrillation can lead to stroke. I mean, very much so. My doctor told me that. And so if you've been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation, you need to be aware that you are, so to speak, a candidate for stroke.
You're at risk for that.
Yeah, you're at a high risk for it. And I did not have symptoms that day that I knew of. The one thing about AFib, when I came back to see my cardiologist the next week, when I went into her, she said, Leela, I'd seen you 2 or 3 times, and at no time were you an AFib when I saw you. And so it was interesting that I did have a stroke when I was gone. Well, I just went for a checkup 2 weeks ago. And when I went for a checkup 2 weeks ago, she told me when I was in the office, I was experiencing AFib, but I didn't know it. It's the type of thing you can have and not feel it, even though your heart is racing. And so you need to have a primary care physician and find out if you have any heart issues. Your primary care physician will refer you to a cardiologist if you are. And I get checkups every 6 months, and I think women should do that because they will know. They do the EKGs, they will know what's going on. And if you are diagnosed with AFib, then you need to be aware that you are at high risk for a stroke.
And the best way to do that is continue those checkups. Get yourself a good primary care physician and a cardiologist, perhaps in that case.
That's correct.
Knowledge is power.
That's right.
So every woman and man, for that matter, should know their numbers, their cholesterol, their blood pressure, their blood sugar. And, those things make a difference, and they have a huge impact on heart disease and stroke.
That's true.
Ladies, thanks so much for stopping in. Appreciate the stories. Great to meet you, Leela.
Oh, it's nice to meet you too.
Always good to see you as well.
Good to see you
And
as
Bob
well.
back there, we appreciate his help as well.